All right, so this is lesson 1-1, and I'm going to go over pretty much most of your homework questions. I'm not going to do them for you. I'm just going to explain what they're asking you to do and how to use your calculator on them. So chapter 1 is already listed in your homework, but I didn't put down what the chapter sections were as far as what they were covering. I figured you could deal with that. So click on here, start on your first question. So when you start with question 1, it's got a table of values, and it's asking you to match that table of values to one of these graphs here. And then the next part is going to ask you to match it to an algebraic equation. So you have to match the table to the graph to the equation. Matching to the equation is easy, but matching to the graph can be difficult. So you kind of have to watch it. So let's go ahead and get your calculator prepared. We're going to put this into your list in your calculator. So let's start with, I'm going to toggle back to your calculator. So turn your calculator on. I want you to go to stats. So hit your stat button. Right here, hit your stat button. And if I go too fast and I lose you, wave madly at me, because you know I won't see you. So here's your stat button. I want you to go into edit. We've done this once before. Maybe not. And you may or may not have information in there. If you're using the school bus calculators, that's probably been cleared out. If you're using your own calculator, you might have some stuff in there from a previous class. So I'm going to show you how to clear that out. So especially if you're using my school bus and you go home, now you'll be able to figure out how to clear it out. So you're going to scroll up to L1, and you want to press clear, not delete. You want to press clear. Nothing appears to happen until you press enter. And now the whole list has disappeared. Then scroll up until the L2 is highlighted, hit clear and enter, and then I also have stuff in my L3. So clear and then enter. So everybody should be starting here. Is everybody here? And it would be to your benefit most likely to use the school bus calculators because you are responsible for knowing how to use them on a test. So here's an opportunity for you to get to know them, because they are slightly different from what I have up here, this pink calculator. So we're going to go ahead and put in our list 1. We're going to put in 4, 7, 10, 13, 16, and 19. 4, 10, 13, 16, and 19. So then go over to list 2. We're going to put in 8, 14, 20, 26, 32, and 38. So the list should be the same length. One should not be longer or shorter than the other. If they are, it's not going to work. So is everybody there? Then I'm going to, let's go ahead and just hit graph for a moment, just to see what you currently have. Now, I actually have a line there. You may have nothing. And I have a line there because if you go to y equals, I actually have an equation left in there from a previous problem that I was doing. So if you go into y equals, I want you to clear out any equations that might be in your y equals. Then go back to graph, and we should all be showing nothing. Why do you think that is? Go back to your list. Go back to stat, edit. If you look at your list, your x values go from 4 to 19. Our x value on the screen goes from -10 to +10. And our y values go from 8 to 38. So the 4, 8 should have shown up, but it didn't. Why didn't it? Well, we've got to turn our stats plots on. So let's do that and see what happens. So go to second, stats plots. And currently it should be showing off, unless you're using your own calculator, so hit enter. And you want the on to be highlighted, so just click enter. And the off should go away, and you should just have the on flashing. Then make sure that you've got the scatter plot selected, which is the first one, right there. And then X list should be L1 and Y list should be L2. Is there anybody that doesn't have L1 and L2 in those lists? Yes. How do I get it? How do I get to here? Go to second, stats plots. You're here. And then hit enter to get into stats plots 1. And then make sure that your on is flashing, and that's the only one highlighted. So if the off is highlighted, you want to click enter on the on, and then the off should go away. So is everybody there? Okay, so then everybody has L1 and L2 in their X list and Y list, correct? Okay, I'll show you later how to change that should you need to, because we will later. Then if you go to Y equals, notice that your plot 1 is highlighted. That's telling you your stats plots are on. If I try to plot something else, it may or may not work because my stats plots are on. All right, so now hit graph. Remember I said that 4-8 should be showing? Now it's showing, but nothing else is showing, right? Interesting. Well, part of that's because of our window. Our Y value, or sorry, our, I want stats. Our Y values are going from 8 to 38. Well, my Y value only goes from -10 to 10. So that's why the first plot is the only one that's showing up. So we have to adjust our window. If you go and look at your question, so I'm going to go back and look at my question. You will notice that they are giving you the viewing window right here. They're saying, and they're actually lying because you'll see why I feel they're lying in a minute. They're saying that the X max and min, the X min is -30, the max is 60. The Y min is -30 and the max is 60. The only thing they don't tell you is what's the scale. So let's go ahead and adjust our window on our calculator based upon -30 to 60. So let's go back to our calculator and go to window. And that's where you adjust your window. So we're going to put in -30 for min, 60 for max, and that's a distance of 90. What do you think is a good scale? Because they didn't tell us what scale to use. What do you think is a good scale? If you take 90 and divide it by 3, that's 30. And if you think about it, that's really 20 hash marks that are showing on your viewing window. I probably would go to 10, or you can even do 5. You could do 5. Let's do 5. And then your Y min is -30, and max is 60, and let's do 5 here again. Now hit graph. Looks almost linear, doesn't it? So let's compare that to our answer choices. So you've got your calculator in front of you. I can't do a split screen, sorry. Wish I could. All right, so based upon what you see, now you're only seeing a snapshot. This implies that everything's positive. Well, that might not necessarily be true, especially look at X. X is changing by what each time? 3. And what is Y changing? Every time. So isn't this a linear function? Y equals mx plus b. It's possible there are actually negative values, they just haven't shown it to you. So it's possible that I actually have a negative portion. So what is the slope if my y is changing by 6 and my x is changing by 3? A slope of 2. And this only works when it's linear, so since it's linear, I'd like to pay attention to my slope. Each of these graphs, you can kind of click on this magnifying glass and kind of look at it. If you look at the slope here, if I went up 2 and over 1, wouldn't I end up here? Yeah. So that can't be it. I'm going to close that. If I look at this graph, if I go from here up 2 and over 1, I would end up here, wouldn't I? So B is a distinct possibility. So I really can't see on my graph where my scatter plot is crossing the x or the y-axis because it doesn't, correct? So I really can't use those as a value. Then this one's interesting. Is this a linear graph? It's really a curve, isn't it? It's slowly increasing. It can't be that one because that would require an x squared, and we don't have an x squared. What kind of graph requires this? An x squared, it's a parabola, isn't it? So C and D are out, so our best option here is B. So I'm going to check my answer, and nice work. Now, oftentimes when you put this scale in, it's not really accurate. Like if we had put 10 in for the scale instead of 5, then it would have stretched our scale out and it might not have looked quite like this. So I was just using my knowledge of slope in order to help figure out which graph is correct. It's harder to pick the graph than it is to do the next part. So then the next part is the algebraic model. So we're going to continue. And we've got to figure out which one of these models matches our graph. This is the easy part. All you do is go into y equals and start putting these in one by one and see which one mimics your curve. So the first one is x minus 2. So I'll read you the rest of them as we go through, but go back to your calculator and go to y equals, and we're going to put in x minus 2. And I'm looking for this line to go through my scatter plots. Did that line go through my scatter plots? Close, but no cigar. So go back to y equals, and this time we're going to put in x plus 2. Oh, so close, but it didn't hit it, right? Just hit one of them. So that's not it. So go back to y equals. And this time we're going to put in x divided by 2. X divided by 2. What's the slope of that line, by the way? X over 2. Take x out of the fraction. What's its coefficient? 1/2. Do you think this is going to work either? Because the slope of the other two lines was 1, wasn't it? That one's even more shallow. Still not the right one. So then we're going to put in 2x. What do you think about that one? Isn't that the slope that we were talking about? Now hit graph, and boom, there it goes. So you're looking for the line that goes through every one of your scatter points. And so I know then that the last answer was my proper choice. So you're going to do this on several questions. Now some of the questions are not linear. They are quadratic or cubic. So like here's, yes, I want to leave this question without finishing it. Look, it just marked me wrong. It really bothers me. All right, so here's this one. And on this one, you can see that x is, again, increasing by the same value, and y is increasing by the same value. So that's linear. Example 4, this time, x is increasing by the same value, right? Is y increasing by the same value? 39, if I add 39 to this, I don't get 116. So this one's not going to be linear. So I'm pretty sure it's probably not going to be this. Probably not going to be this. Could be one of these two. It just depends. So there's another one just like that, just like that, just like that. Then we hit 7. So 7, 8, and 9 are all the same type of problem. So I'm going to actually really do number 9, but I'm going to talk about 7 and 8 just briefly. So you've got the year here. You're going to put year because time always goes in the x-axis. So you're going to put this in your lists for list 1. Then you're going to put list 2, you're going to put the women in there, and you're going to put the men's information in list 3. So you're going to have 3 lists this time. So you'll end up with a double scatter plot. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. When you put in the time, don't put in 1970 in your calculator. Put in like 0. Let 1970 equal times 0. If this is times 0, what would be 1975? 5. And then this would be 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. But you have to be careful, and I'll show you what I mean by that when we actually find the equation that approximates this data, which I'll show you in number 9. You have to be careful when you convert this that you don't use 0 in your actual calculations of the equation. So I think that's all I want to say about that one. So let's look at number 8. Number 8 is one of my favorites because they're trying to trick you. So we're going to create a scatter plot that looks like this, where it's a double scatter plot. If you have the nice little colored calculators, they give you the nice colors on there. But if you're the rest of us who have the old black and white, you can't tell the difference. Now, if you look at these two graphs, C and D, oh, no, not those two. Try these two graphs, B and C. Don't they look identical? Well, one of them's got to be the right answer. What's the difference between the two? They look visually identical. Okay. Now, I probably would not have caught that the first time because I don't see stuff like that, me personally. But notice here the female is blue, whereas here now they're red. Isn't that tricky? So you could easily, and when you get to the multiple choice, you really only have 2 options to get the right answer. Because once you get to option 2, it's your last check. So pay attention to the fact that your women here are going from small to high, and the men are going from high to low. So this is going from high to low, so what should this blue be? Men. And this is going from low to high, that should be women. And so this should be the correct graph, because indeed they do graph this way, so just letting you know. So watch out for that on 8, and when you get yours, they'll all be mixed up. So it's not necessarily answer C, just to let you know. All right, so let's actually do number 9. So we've got year, women, and men. So I choose to let 1989 be year 0. So if that's year 0, how far are my years apart? 1. So if this is year 0, then this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So in your list 1, so go back to stats, hit enter for edit, and in list 1, just scroll over to list 1 and make sure that you scrolled to the very first number in list 1, which if you just put it in there was number 4. So you're going to replace number 4 with 0, and you're going to go down 0, 1, 2, all the way to 6. And you should end up with one extra number than you had previously in the previous problem that we put in here. So 0 through 6. And then I want you to put the women in list 2 and the men in list 3. So I'll give you a couple minutes while you're doing that. Say that again? Well, if I do that, then people can't see the information. So in list 1, bring up your calculator and I'll show you. So you're going over here. Oops. Did you lose your lists? No. Oh, there we go. Okay. So here, you want to put in, where'd you get those numbers from? You want to put in 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Delete. When you go to put in the list 2 information, make sure that you start at the top, that you don't start at one below. So now you start putting in the information that you see up there. If you put your calculator down, then I will know that you are finished. So do make sure that all 3 lists are the same length, that one list is not longer than the other list. And you'll know this because if you hit graph, it'll say mismatch. If it says mismatch, then you have something wrong in your stats lists. As soon as your calculator's down, I know you're done. Okay, so this is what my calculator looks like. And that's missing the top row. So we all good there. If you hit graph right now, remember we're using the same, we had the same scale as the previous problem that we had in here, plus where's that line coming from? It's that y equals. So go into y equals and clear out any equations that are in there because we don't want that. And now we're back to that, and that's all squished up, right? So we have to go and adjust our own scale. We're not going to be told this time what the scale is. So go back into your lists, so stat, edit. Look at your list. Your x-axis goes from 0 to 6, doesn't it? So what would we want our scale to go to? 0 to 10 would seem reasonable. But you always want to go a little under, a little above. We're not going to have a negative value with time. So I'm going to go from 0 to 10, and our scale would be 1. That's reasonable for the x-axis. But for the y, notice that your smallest y value is 38.6, and your largest y value is 87.8. So we want to go a little bit below this and a little bit above that. So it would be reasonable to go from 0 to 100. If we go from 0 to 100, what do you think your scale should be? 5 or 10. So let's go into our window and let's go from 0 to 10. I'm going to have a scale of 1. And then we're going to go from 0 to 100, and let's keep our scale of 5. We'll just see what that looks like. So that's under window. Is everybody good there? Then if I hit graph, notice only one set of scatter plots shows up. Because go back to your stats plots. Go to second, y equals, and go to your first stats plots. Notice that it's only pulling from list 1 and list 2. We need to pull it also from list 3. The only way to do that is to open up a second stats plots. So go back into second, y equals, and go to stats 2 and hit enter. We want to turn this one on. Hit enter so that the off is no longer lit up. You want the scatter plot shown, and you want your list this time to read L1 and L3. So your Y list needs to be L3. It probably reads L2, be my guess. If it does, if it's not reading L3, then look above the number 3 key. What do you see above the number 3 key? Do you see L3 in blue? How are you going to get to it? So second, and then hit 3. So if I hit second, my arrow key's flashing, and now I hit the number 3, and L3 should pop in there. Anybody not get that? Now when you hit graph, what happens? Yeah, and if you've got the nice colored calculators, you can color code them if you want to also. So that's one thing that you're going to have to do in 7 or 8, especially 8. That's what you're going to have to do in that one. Number 9 wasn't asking for that, so let's go back to the question that number 9 was asking. And it says the following. So 9 is asking you, and be really careful, you got to read what they tell you in the directions. It says the table shows the percent of male and female populations in a certain county employed in the workforce in certain years since 1989. Model the data algebraically with linear equation of the form y equals mx plus b. So they're telling you that even though this is not purely linear, I'd have to double check to make sure, that they're telling you anyway to use slope-intercept form. Assume it is. That means I have to find the slope and the y-intercept. Then they're quite clearly telling you which data points to use. They want you to use 1989 and 1995. Don't we need 2 points in order to write the equation of a line? Okay, so you're going to write, they're first looking for the women's employment statistics. We have one line representing women's and one line representing men. So we're going to just start with the women. The ordered pair that you're going to use for women, remember we let this in our stats equal 0 and this one equals 6. You don't want to use 0 and 6 when you're finding the slope. You want to use the actual numbers. So for our slope for females, there's our template. Which is our y values? Is it the year or the women percent? The women's percent. And so I'm going to take the bigger number, 58.5, because the difference in your y's goes up top, and then the 38.6. And then I want to use 1995, the actual year, and here I'll tell you why in a minute. And then minus 1989. If you go ahead and use the 0 and the 6, and you have 6 minus 0 here, you're going to still get the same number as we get with our slope, so your slope won't get messed up. But here's what will get messed up. So you're going to come up with some answer. I'm not going to do the math right now. And we're going to have y equals mx and then plus b, right? If this is 0 and this is 38.6, isn't the x value 0 on the y-axis? So if you let, because from here, once you have your slope, you're going to choose one of these points and use point slope. Y minus y sub 1 equals m times x minus x sub 1. Remember that from the last chapter? If I put 0 and 38.6 in here, you're going to come out with 38.6 as your y-intercept. That's not necessarily the y-intercept. So you have to be careful of that. So, because we vicariously change that. So you want to be using the actual real point. So once you get your slope, you'll put it in here, and then you'll choose one of these 2 points and put it in for x sub 1, y sub 1, and find out what your actual equation is. And then you'll do the same thing for the men. The men will have a different slope. The men will have a different y-intercept. So try that. That's what that one's looking for. Any questions on that? Okay. So then let's go to the next set of questions. All right, so then they're going to start in with a series of comparison kind of questions. So that's the same thing. Oh, wait, let me show you something on this question number 10. So question number 10, one of the things they're asking you to do is to take this equation. So they give you the equation for female, and they give you the equation for male. So they go ahead and do that for you. You need to put them into your y equals, and then go to calc intersect, and you can find the intersection to answer this question here. And then the second part's going to ask you some additional questions. So that one's a little different than the others. Then here they're starting with some comparison questions. A garden shop sells 13-inch by 13-inch squared stepping stones, and for the same price as a 14-inch round stone. If all stepping stones are the same thickness, which option gives the most rock for the money? They're both the same price. How do you find the area of a square? Just a square. How do you find the area? Yeah. So you just multiply those together, right? Length times width, 13 by 13. And that one turns out to be what? Okay. So in this particular example, it's 169 inches squared. And then for a 14-inch round stone, what is the area formula for a circle? Remember that area is a squared unit, right? You can see area and you can touch it, so it's squared units. The only formula for area, the only circle formula that has a squared in it is pi r squared. So if you get the circumference and the area formula is confused, think area is always square dimension, so it's pi r squared. 14 inches, is that your radius or is that your diameter? The assumption is they don't tell you. The assumption is that that's the diameter. So when I put in my radius, my diameter is 14, my radius is 7 inches, and so I end up with 49 pi inches squared, but we have to compare that to 169. So we have to take 49, multiply it by pi. I would use your pi button on your calculator. Don't use 3.14. And then compare that. They want you to round it to the 10. Then compare that to the 169. Whichever has a larger area, that's the better buy. All right, so there's that one. Then, the next one. This one, they give you the equation d equals 16t squared. It's free fall drop. And in part A and part B, they give you two different values. One value gets put in for d, and the other value gets put in for t. Remember, t is time. So that's all I'm going to tell you on that one. I think it's pretty self-explanatory from there. Then we start into a series of questions asking you to solve the equation algebraically, which we did a lot of this in the last chapter. This one's a bit of a review. The rest of them, not so much. What would you have to do here in order to solve? Well, you need to get, on this particular one, yes, you can get the w squared by itself, right? You could do one of two things. You could either get one side equal to 0, or you could get the squared, the w squared term on one side and everything else over on the other, right? And then take the square root of both sides. When you take the square root of both sides, that's where that plus minus comes in. If not, if you have it set equal to 0, you're going to end up with a difference of 2 squares. So you'll factor that as a plus b times a minus b and set each of those equal to 0. That's how you get your two different answers that are the same number but different signs. And so they put in the plus minus for you. You just need to figure out what the actual number is. So that one's not so bad, but this one starts to get a little bit trickier. Can you solve it the way it is? It's not set equal to 0, is it? And you can't do x equals 42, and is that a 5x? Yeah. Minus 29 is equal to 42. Can't solve it that way. What do you do instead? Yeah, distribute your x, and then wouldn't you subtract 42? And then you can either factor, complete the square, or the quadratic formula. It's your choice. You're not being pigeonholed into a specific method. So it's your choice, but you've got to show your work. Then the next one's a little bit more difficult. Now we have a square root in there. It is set equal to 0, but can you solve it that way? What do I have to do? If you tried to square both sides right now, you wouldn't want to. It'd be super ugly. What you want to do is get the term that has the square root on one side by itself. So you could subtract the x and the 6 and put it over there if you want to, or it would be a lot easier if you just added 3 radical x plus 16 to both sides. And so if I add that, I end up with x plus 6 is equal to 3 square root of x plus 16. Right? Now, theoretically, you could divide both sides by 3, but it's not going to go into the x evenly. It makes it really ugly, so I personally wouldn't. Square both sides now. But be careful when you square this. It is not x squared plus 36. This is x plus 6 times x plus 6. So when you FOIL it, x times x is x squared. X times 6 is 6x. 6 times x is 6x. So that gives you 12x. 6 times 6 is 36. So you would have missed your 12x. Then when you square the right side, you have to square the 3 and then square the radical. So 3 squared is 9. What's that radical squared? X plus 16. Then distribute your 9. I'm assuming that's right. Since it's 54, that's right. All right, so then we're going to subtract 9x and 144 from both sides so that we get 0 on the right side. And so you'll simplify, and then from there you can either factor, complete the square, or the quadratic formula. Again, it's your choice. All right, so next. Can I erase that? Was somebody upset? No, we're good. Now this is nice because you get to go back to using your calculator, but read what the directions are telling you. It says solve the equation graphically by converting it to an equivalent equation with 0 on the right side and then finding the x-intercepts. Don't make it harder than what it is. In other words, don't square both sides just like I taught you to. You don't have to use your algebra on this one. Use your calculator. In order to use your calculator, one side has to be set equal to 0. So if I were you, I would take, this is one term, that's 2 terms. I'd rather move 1 term than 2. So I'm going to move this to the left by doing what? Subtracting it. So if I subtract it, this is what goes into my y equals 2x minus 2 minus the square root of x plus 5. And that's what is equal to 0. So we're going to put that into our calculator right now. And then we're going to compare it to your answer choices up here. So this is a good opportunity for me to show you how to turn your stats plots off, because if you don't, then they're going to still show up on your problem. So here's our calculator. Go to y equals, and the shortcut to turning your stats plots off, see these up here, how they're highlighted? If you take your cursor and you move up, see how the plot 1 is blinking, just hit enter. Now you can see it's blinking even more dramatically. Now cursor over to the right, now it's not highlighted at all. So do the same thing to plot 2, hit enter, and then cursor down. Then we're going to put in this equation right here, 2x minus 2 minus, and then the square root is above the x squared. So second square root of x plus 5. If you are using the school bus calculators, you will need to end the parentheses here because it might not graph it. And if I hit graph right now, what's wrong? It's on our old scale. Do you remember how to get it back to the standard scale? Zoom 6. Now that may not be what we want, but we'll have to see. Oh, there it is. Good. Can I see the x-intercept there? What is it called when we find the x-intercept? The zeros. So you go to second calc and use your zeros. So that's what they're looking for there. And then if I look at my question again, so you got your graph in front of you. So all you have to do is try to compare this to the graph. Now it appears that it's crossing between what two integers? Your graph, what's it crossing between at the x-axis? Between what two integers? 2 and 3, right? So is this crossing between 2 and 3? And notice that they're telling you it's a standard viewing window. Is this between 2 and 3? Nope. Is this between 2 and 3? Nope. How about this? Nope. And it better be this one. And so in this case, it'll be D. And then, and then the last part, so that's the first part. The last part is you're going to actually tell them what the x-intercept is, and they'll tell you where to round to. Okay? Does yours look funny? Yours goes off the page because... Let me see mine.
It's in the same area, it just stops.
That's weird. Is your stats plots on? No. I don't know. That's a very, I haven't seen that one yet. Maybe it's the calculator. I'd have to look at it a little bit more. Thank you, dear. Hold on to the calculator. Okay, so let's look at the next question. Maybe. All right, so on this question, I bring it up only to show you or remind you where the x to the negative 1 key is. You can either use your caret and put that exponent as negative 1, or you have an x to the negative 1 key. So go to your calculator. And then go down here. Isn't this where your x to the negative 1 key is, right here? Underneath the math button. So you can use that key. And then same thing as the one we just did. All you have to do is subtract. You get 0 on one side, and that's what you're going to put into the y equals. So I personally would prefer to subtract one term rather than two. So I personally would be subtracting this right here and putting it behind those two. Just a suggestion. And then just a note for question number 18, you need to write the equation in y equals mx plus b form before you can answer these questions. So they tell you that the company charges $20 per day plus 8 cents per mile. Which one of these two is the constant? The $20 per day is the constant. You can go no miles and you're going to be charged the $20. This is your variable. It depends upon how many miles you go. So this is your m, and then this is your b. And for 19, just answer that question. And then for 20, we're back to, now they've given you the graph. All you have to do is go into y equals and put these in there. You've got a standard viewing window. Pay attention to where it's crossing the x-axis and the y-axis. And then choose whichever one's correct. And then the last question goes back to your list. You're going to put that in your lists. And then it's real easy. Turn your stat plots on. Adjust your scale to what seems right, because they didn't tell you what the scale was. So use an appropriate scale and then put these in, and whichever one goes right across every one of those, that's the equation that fits. Simple enough? Do you see why I didn't write notes today? It's really just explaining. You're doing a lot of it on your calculator. Okay? All right, so my suggestion would be that you try this homework tonight, because if you wait, you're going to have to rewatch the video because you're going to forget how to use your calculator.